Okay, I'm here for another episode of Reflections, and it's going to be another old school one. We're really going back into the past of the old Counter-Strike now, because it's going to be Hare. And for anyone who doesn't know who Hare is, if they're only a CSGO follower, the easiest way to describe him is actually that he is Mouz's brother. So if you follow Moses, who's on E-League, and also, now the crazy thing about that Hare, to start off with, okay, this is actually a great way to segue into the interview, because that's how actually the way I knew about Moses first was the other way around. Because Hare was a known player, right? Hare was playing in Invite already. He was on teams like Gamers X, And then what happened was later in the day, eventually it's like he brought his little brother in, and then he let his little brother play on a team. And people even thought back then, oh, he's actually even purposely gone to a lower level team just to let his brother play in Invite. Like Moses used to be Hare's brother, not the other way around, right?
That's right. But I'm totally used to it right now. Everyone who is in the game and follows the game now knows me as Moses' brother, and even it hurts me, but I have even introduced myself a couple times more recently within the past year as Moses' brother, and people are like, oh, that's great. So that does hurt a little bit, but we're super proud of him, so it doesn't hurt that bad.
Okay, so as I kind of alluded to there, like the first time you came on the radar for me was when you were actually playing with the Gamers X team. And the context for people who don't know is like Gamers X was always a team because it was actually just a cafe in, I think it was in Southern California. It was like a gaming cafe out there. And so famously what they used to do is they just had a lot of local talent, which meant basically like Asian kids, nearly all like Korean immigrants who played in these cafes, and then they would get a bunch of them together who'd have good aim or whatever, but they were never known as like, very tactical teams or whatever. And they'd had this one pretty decent lineup for the summer CPL before you joined, where they had like the Steel, the Canadian guy, they had Method, they had a bunch of good players on this team. And then you were in the lineup afterwards. And I remember when you were added to the lineup, first of all, I mean, immediately I could tell that you obviously weren't from Southern California because your name wasn't like Kim or Lee or anything. It's like, okay, O'Toole, that's an interesting name to be on this particular lineup. But then also I remember because everyone did say, well, I mean, this Gamers X lineup is going to suck, obviously, because, all those big names we talk about there, they all went off to better teams, they're all gone. So what was this first, was this the first big team you were on?
Let's see. I think between this and Eminence, and it sounds really bad, but I can't remember if Eminence came first or Gamers X came first.
Eminence might have been first, but they were just mainly an invite team online, right?
Yeah, right. True. Yeah, I think Gamers X, we had some good expectations. Not me personally. We actually went to the CPL with a 6-man roster and kind of rotated out depending on what map we played at first, and then also who was playing hot. So I started off on the bench and then came in for a second and third map and played good, but there was no expectation of me. To be honest, I don't even know at that point. I wasn't in my strategic role at that point. I wasn't calling strats, so I was kind of just a backup or a resource player, an entry fragger, or someone to go and just take grenade damage and get headshotted so everyone else could frag. And I think that was kind of my role on that team, and that was fine for me because that was my first sponsored team, and that was my first time playing with people who were considered good gamers, and it really got my name out for that first time.
Sure. How old are you now?
I am 32.
Okay, so that was 2002. That would have been, you would have been what, 18 at the time?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay.
Somewhere close to that, yeah.
Okay, because one of the interesting things I know about the NA scene, which a lot of people didn't necessarily follow, was because America is such a huge country compared to if it's like Sweden or Germany or something, most people who came up back in the day in Counter-Strike, came up through their local LAN scene first. That's one of the ways you get known, and you go there and you play with, the other guy who's like inviting your region, and you see how good you are, and you play in mixed teams, etc. Who were the people around the area? I mean, you come from Michigan, so who were the people around that area at the time that you were coming up? Were there any other names that we'd know?
So no, really. Nothing in Michigan really stands out. And to be honest, I wasn't even really a part of that LAN scene. I guess even after Gamers X, and I was probably kicked or we disbanded, or I don't even know exactly how it went at this point. Sorry, 32-year-old memory is terrible.
That's all right.
But really, I think when I started getting big or recognized is within United 5 when I
Sure.
joined the United 5 team with Concussion. It was Concussion and Nutshot. Nutshot might be a name that you guys recognize. But really from that point, it just came from working hard and recruiting people from pubs and recruiting people from very basic Cal Open or really low-level leagues to come and join and play. And honestly, I think most of the stuff came from pubs, Trip and fRoD, and following people and I guess recruiting people from cheater teams who I thought were legit or could have been legit, and then building teams around pretty much no-namers.
Yeah. So I mean, okay. So when you mentioned here playing with Notshot, like he was a person you were in the team before with Valor and Concussion as well. But before that, okay, the first time you play like officially with Moses is when you're in this Chikara team, which is a very weird group of guys. And so, like I say in my setup, that really was the way people thought at the time. Like they knew who Hare was, and later on we know who Notshot, etc. But Moses was obviously your younger brother. I mean, was there a degree to which you were kind of like trying to bring him into the scene? Was he like a later addition to being like a pro level player? I mean, he told me like you guys went to like every local LAN and you just never used to lose, So what was the transition bringing Moses into the scene like?
So with Shikara, I think maybe that is what happened after Gamers X, but I just wanted to play with my brother. It came down to we lived under the same roof. It would be absolutely awesome if instead of his computer in his room and my computer in my room, we put both of our computers together in the basement, and all of a sudden we were playing together, and then you can just like dominate people at that point online when you have at least two people from your team sitting side by side talking out loud and looking at each other's screens. So I think it was more of just a fun thing, and he had some pretty cool, mature, I guess older for the time people on his team that I really vibed with as well. So that was more of a move for fun, and at that point my mind or my goals weren't to like achieve this mass domination, or I didn't have these high goals of being number one. I just wanted to get on a team with my brother and have fun and win matches.
Okay. Be careful with whatever you're fidgeting, because remember you're using the mic from the laptop, so it picks it up.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Right. So when you made this team with Moses, and obviously, like we're saying, the next couple of teams was basically like you're starting to see the formation of what becomes United 5, obviously. Now, you mentioned already, like when you were in Gamers X, you weren't like the tactician, you weren't the in-game leader, and putting together the United 5 team wasn't obvious that these players were going to be good. I mean, for example, okay, now everyone knows fRoD became a very good player. It was an excellent player eventually, but actually, this was probably his first legit big offline team. He'd been in like Green Berets and stuff, and that hadn't really gone that well, and people did have a rep around him, like, oh, he's just an onliner. And I remember Trip was in like that DOF team who people said had cheaters in and stuff. So what was it like in this sense? Like, were you the leader of all these later teams? Like, was there a reason why you decided, like, I'm going to be the in-game leader, I'm going to put the team together?
Yes, I loved picking out these players, and I remember Trip came from this famous CK3 pub, and it was weird because back in the day we didn't really have ESEA and forum boards and all this stuff, but there was a server that you could go through. It was CK3, and it was a giant 18 or 24 person pub, and you could, at any one time you got in there, you could be pubbing with these top level players, and that was where I found him, is just frequenting that pub and seeing Trip there all the time, and then we started getting talking, and I think that's how we talked about joining a team or creating a team, or I don't know exactly how it went, but that's how Trip came about. And then as far as fRoD, he was in the Art of Execution,
Sure, yep.
AOX, and it was a complete cheater bullshit competing
Yeah.
team at the time. And you know what? I think that I was tired of just getting beat by him, and I knew he was never going to really amount to anything in that team because it was so blatant that they were cheaters. But I just had a pretty good feeling that he wasn't, and that when put under a structure in a good team environment with me and my brother and Trip and whoever our fifth ended up being, that fRoD would be this amazing piece of a puzzle.
So one of the things that I think a lot of people who weren't from the NA scene never understood about how you kind of teams came up is that actually until you reached the invite level, it was like going through a minefield. Because if you played in like open or main, I mean, you're talking about here like cheater teams, there was a lot of cheating online because there was no anti-cheat in Cal, unfortunately. And so actually, for example, you're talking here about AOX. So this AOX team, I remember the storyline, okay, which was that online, even the guys in 3D were telling me like, oh yeah, they would play us super close, the scrums would be close, and then we would go to a LAN and, we would beat them, 13-2 or something, like they would just get destroyed. So it was obvious there's something fishy going on. When you were bringing your team up and you were trying to get like the United 5 team going, etc., was it difficult to get to the invite level without having all these cheaters and all this difficulty, like kind of setting yourself apart from the other teams online? Is that difficult?
I think that it ended up not being that difficult. I think in general it should be, and it was for a lot of people, but you can either cheat or you can take this extreme level of organization and tactics at the time. Because, for example, nowadays people are able to spend 8 and 10 and 12 hours playing this game because they have salaries. Back then, no one played 8 and 10, 12 hours of this game because there was no money in it. You just couldn't do it. But the people that somehow sacrificed everything in their life to do that, which I was a part of, actually could have a step up from even these teams that were cheating and configuring and very online based. If you put in the work and you run through the motions day in and day out with the same 5 people, you can produce some solid results, even coming from the very bottom of the ladder at that time.
Yeah, so I mean, this is obviously a key element to your story because actually the main thing you became known for was being an in-game leader and a guy who's working on strategies and trying to like figure out the other team. So I remember reading interviews and hearing stories from Moses where he said that like you used to be super into the strategy element. Like at the time, a lot of the NA teams, tried to play. I mean, actually, it still happens to some degree now. Like kind of a loose style. You play for your individual skill, and you're trying to just win based on like outplaying the opponent. He told me that you would literally just be doing crazy shit. Like you'd be like coming home from school. Like, well, I mean, maybe he was in school. He'd come home from school, and you'd be like, I've figured out this smoke here and this strat we're gonna run, and you had all these notebooks with them all. Were you really just going super in depth on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I loved it. That was all that was going through my head at that point in my life, all day long is strats and smokes and all right. So this person's given us a lot of trouble in this position. How can we get him out of position to make something work? And Counter-Strike 1.6 with the long round time, more than anything, was a game of chess. And the frags, you just had to assume that given the moment and given the opportunity, everyone would get the frag, both your teammates and the opponents.
Yeah.
So what my job was to move my teammates into a position where they always had the advantage, because you just have to assume that they're going to get the kill and the opponents won't in that. So for me, it felt like a game of chess. Counter-Strike has since evolved, and it's not so much of that there's no guarantee that someone pops on your screen and you will get the kill. It's more of a, I don't know. You guys know it better than I do at this point, but it's not exactly like how it was when I was into the strategic side of it.
Sure. But one thing people will take for granted is that now, even teams who play a loose style, this part is understood, that they're going to face teams that are tactical. And it's certainly known that you even the most loose team prepares some basic things, and has some things in mind. But back then, actually, I know a lot of the NA teams, they weren't particularly heavy on this style, right? Like a lot of them famously, I remember going into some of back then it would have been like, it wouldn't even have been Ventrilo probably. It would probably be some other talk, maybe TeamSpeak or something. If I ever went into some of my friends who were in the NA scenes, TeamSpeaks, and they were playing scrims, I was like, is this a joke? Like, I've been in the European team scrim, and like, you aren't doing any tactics. And they're like, no, we are. Like, you heard when I said, like, let's get a pick at mid, and then we're going to, like, what? Where are the tactics, And
yeah.
what did going this deep into it give you an edge on the other NA teams?
Absolutely. We were... for a long time, battling between the 1 and 2 spots of North America, usually between us and Team 3D. There was a period where I felt like we were a lot stronger than them, but we went back and forth. They had a better skill level of team, and they did much better with the loose play style than we did. So ultimately, probably won more tournaments and more big name LAN tournaments at the time than we did, but definitely going back and forth between 1 and 2. But it says a lot because we started at nothing. We reached the top of North America really quick, and then we had a year or two where we kind of stayed there.
So, okay, this is one of the interesting things as well, because I know at the time, if the thing about Team 3D, I always describe them like this. It's because they had all the big star names, and they had a lot of the old veterans who were like the X3 guys and stuff. They were basically like NA royalty, like no one's ever allowed to say they're better than these players, and they've always been on top. They even had that like a kind of entitlement in their attitude, of like, we're on top, we're always going to be on top. Anyone who comes up now, you're just lucky, or you're online or whatever. And I know that one thing that used to really piss them off is if anyone thought they were as good as them. If anyone came in and was like, I think we can beat you guys. And I know at the time, some of them didn't necessarily love you for this reason, right? Because they saw you as coming along and being like, I think United 5's going to beat you this season in Cal Invite. Like, we're as good as you. I'm prepared. Were you kind of like obsessed with trying to chase Team 3D? Were they the team you were looking at, studying, and going for?
Absolutely. Hands down, they were the goal. And we achieved that goal at a CPL, so on LAN. And that was one of the best feelings at that tournament that I've ever had, really. Aside from all the important stuff in life, like getting married and kids. But as far as gaming goes, that was one of the best feelings you could have.
So that was a very rare thing, though, because actually, if you look at Team 3D, okay, sure, they could lose to the best European teams. This could happen, okay? They were up there with them, and they could go back and forth. But actually, famously, if you want to talk about like beating NA teams as like defending home court or whatever, they used to be very good at that. They used to take care of all the NA teams, all their rivals, and like whether they placed high enough was depending on which Europeans they ran into. So to beat them at this CPL, I remember this was the one that was like the real shock, because this is where they kind of had like their fall from grace, You beat them. I think MIBR was the other team that beat them. So they had a couple of teams who weren't Europeans defeating them. Was it a momentous moment then to take them down like on LAN as well, where they can't use any excuses about, Cal has no prize money or whatever?
Oh, it was great because it was, and it wasn't just that we beat them. It was in the fashion that we beat them. It was so strategic that we beat them. We shot them in the back the whole game. It was like they just fell into the strategic trap. So for me, as the strat caller and in-game leader, I felt like I really showed myself what preparation can do, and I showed my teammates, Moses, Trip, fRoD, and Slick, that they could good job for buying into my system because it worked, and not to take anything away from them skill-wise because they all played amazing during the whole event, but it was it was just great shooting Team 3D in the back like they didn't know what we were doing. It was on CPL Mill, by the way. Yeah.
So, okay, one of the things about United 5 that was actually famous even at the time was, like I said, this was when fRoD really became a big name. Before that, he was a Cal Invite player, he would have online highlights, but he'd never had, like, big LAN performances before. And so this was where your team obviously had the big upset over 3D. And because he's the sniper, if you're a star sniper, you're always going to be a highlight player, because it's just a flashy weapon, But I remember reading interviews where when you described like how you used him, you actually had a very strategical sense to how you even used him. Like he wasn't like a K-sharp person who just took the AWP, went to a spot and just tried to make crazy shots, Wasn't there like a logic of like, listen, fRoD, you're going to go here, so it divides the map, or you can tell me if someone crosses this area, and it's like there was like a rationale to how fRoD was used in United 5, right?
Right, it was a very safe style, so that it gave us some good success, but he probably didn't get the highlights or the big name from playing on our team because we didn't let him go loose as much as probably he did in his teams and his play style down the road after United 5, where he really built a name for himself. But it was very strategic. Take a shot, fall back, take a different angle, call for help. Type stuff where we could always count on him for hitting the shot, but we didn't want him to ever get into a position where he had to re-peak.
Okay.
But or like another thing on T side, we would get him set up to be ready to hold an angle where we would get a counter terrorist out of position momentarily, but then when there was no threat and that counter-terrorist tried to return to his previous position, then he would get picked off by fRoD, was another big way that we used him.
Okay. So I know from some of the people who've been leaders of fRoD after you that he could be a tricky person to deal with sometimes. Like sometimes he had his own idea about what he wanted to do. And I can't remember if it was an interview, like one of those ASCII SEAs a long time, or like just a written interview you did. But so someone did, I think it might be your brother maybe, said that he used to sometimes just go past your room and he'd hear you you'd be looking through demos and you'd be writing everyone in the team emails of what they did wrong in the Cal match or something. And you'd just be saying stuff like, fucking fRoD, what's he doing there? I told him not to peek. Like, was it tough to corral these guys sometimes?
It was, but it was fun, and it was probably more of me being hyper anal than it was them making mistakes. It was I loved watching demos of our match from the previous night. I mean, we even had homework, so we'd have a match and we'd win. And we either did it immediately after or the next day. Everyone would be assigned another player on the team. So I would watch fRoD, fRoD would watch Trip would watch Slick would watch Moses, etc. And we would write down what we thought they did good and then what we thought they did bad. And then when we met together the next day, we would all watch the demo, which at the time it was really hard to time stamp it and hit go all at the same time. Really funny now that I'm thinking about it. So we'd all watch it at the same time and then try and pause it at the same time and go round by round, and just everyone would say what each other did good and not good. And that was great on itself. And then the second part of that is it allowed me to actually see what fRoD was doing and how he would react in certain situations, so that I knew as a teammate that, all right, when this happens, fRoD's going to do this, so I can contribute by doing X, Y, or Z. Or it was just like I don't know, it was something that we started doing to get better, but it ended up being a little bit of an obsession, and we really benefited from that type of training style.
Okay. So I kind of alluded to it before, but because I knew the Team 3D guys very well, because, I'd been to a lot of the tournaments back in the early days, and I kind of got to know some of them. One of them, who was actually a friend of mine, was Moto, the leader of Team 3D. And I know actually he's someone who very much had the attitude I was talking about before, where I think I have to say some of the other guys were a bit just more easily led, and I think he influenced them in this sense where he really did have that entitlement, right? Where if someone came up and they got good, he always had some reason. It was always like they're online, or they're just using a special config, or they just cheat, or even worse, he'd be like, oh, the guy's just cocky, or he's good. Okay, he's got really good aim, but he's just an asshole. He'd always have some weird way of rationalizing away, right? That the person wasn't at their level. And so with your team being kind of this upstart, who was challenging them and getting wins off them, I know that they weren't really big fans of yours, and obviously you were the figurehead of the team. You would think, funnily enough, though, that he should have been able to see kind of like that you guys did it in a legit way, because you did it with tactics, which was his whole forte. It wasn't just that they did it just by having good skills or whatever. Did you ever feel like there was was there a strong rivalry between you guys?
Yeah, I hated Moto. I still, when I hear his name, it makes me cringe a little bit. I don't know why. I'm an adult, shouldn't, but he's
You got under your skin a bit.
Yeah, and for the exact same reason that you mentioned, it just seemed like someone who felt very entitled. And also, me personally, not only was I competing versus fRoD, but I actually felt like I was competing versus Moto, because he was the tactician and the in-game leader of that team for when we played against it. So definitely I felt on a personal level that I was competing against Moto. And fRoD was the one that had all the great sponsors, had the great manager in Torbull at the time.
Sure.
They had a lot of things that we wanted, and so it was something that he was the bad guy, and I don't know. He's a wiener, I guess. Is the best.
Okay.
I don't know another word. He's a wiener.
Okay. Right. When you mentioned there, like Team 3D had all the sponsors, etc., you were actually the second team after Team 3D did to get some of those sponsors. I mean, Nvidia started sponsoring United 5. You started had a setup there. How did that come about? Because obviously that was a very different than a lot of the teams. Like even some of the other teams, people might remember famous names like Zex or Rival. These teams weren't like organizations like we have now. They didn't have proper sponsors. They maybe had someone who was backing them, but it wasn't like an organization with a head person and someone seeking sponsors. And obviously this is key to your career, because later on, when you transitioned out of being a player, you were still running United 5. So what was the process like of going from being just a Counter-Strike team to trying to make a proper organization?
So Craig is the one that really helped me out. And this is where you can find out what a great guy that Craig is, and how he had insight on what esports could be in the future. But he knew that having just one invite level team with sponsorship forever isn't going to benefit the community. It's not going to make a future for esports. It's not going to make a future for these teams and players. So I don't know exactly how it came about, but he was really one of the people who walked us through the steps on getting incorporated, and then getting some sponsorship, and really helping us obtain at least our NVIDIA and Intel sponsorship, which I say this, but at the time, it's like $3,000 for the team per month. It's not anything like these sponsorships are like nowadays. So it's like you're fighting for 5 people to share $3,000. And then some travel expenses on top of it after that. But to be honest, so there was another player at the time who worked with me. His name was C-Pence, and he was a
Unreal Tournament player, right?
Yeah, an Unreal Tournament, and then later Halo player. And he was a co-owner of United 5 and helped with the sponsorship stuff. And, I'm going to come out and say it right now. Being 18 and 19 years old and having that responsibility to open an organization, I made many of mistakes along the way, and am not proud of I guess how United 5 ended up or ended, or some of the changes that we made. But I think a little bit of that was being 19 years old, not really having a place and not really having too much direction, and then just wanting to play, not really even focusing on the business side of it, but just wanting to give myself an outlet to play, because that's what I was mostly concerned of, and that was just something I could do to bring to the team so that would allow us to make it to all these tournaments.
Okay, so we talked about like the classic United 5 run, which is the one where you came 7th at that CPL Winter 2003, and you beat Team 3D, and this is obviously like a great moment. Now, as we go into the next year, the story isn't quite as good a lot of the time, but before we get into the rest of it, like what happened with the other lineups and stuff, first of all, there has to be a section where we just take a moment to chastise Moses, because I've told him this so many times, and he even admits it now, dude. Like, he was literally one of the best players in the team. He was, obviously your brother, so you had a great relationship with him, but like one of the backbone members of the team. And he just straight up retired from playing for his girlfriend, and he wanted to just be with his girl at the time, right? And he even says now, he looks back and he realizes, like, yeah, that was just like young love, I was a bit naive, and that was my prime. I should have kept playing. Did losing Moses kind of not kill the team because it kept going, but like it messed up the lineup you had at the time, right?
I don't know exactly how much of a contribution that was, or how much of a contributing factor that was. Definitely hurt us. I think definitely I'll put a little bit of blame on myself in wanting to make a little bit more of a local team.
Sure.
I saw the potential in how good we could be if we had 5 people living together, and I think that we would have maybe made exceptions if I would have gotten a lot more pushback from Moses or the other guys, but I think probably I kind of hurt United 5 in a sense, in trying to make an all-local team, which ended up being a great experience for me. But no, to go back to that Moses thing, yeah, he was pussy whipped, and I did not agree. This is not a girl that you should put
Give up everything
aside
for, right?
Yeah, no, sorry, bud.
Okay.
So,
what was he actually like in his prime, Moses? What type of a player was he? Because, I mean, obviously he came back for a little while afterwards, but unfortunately joined Tech, so nothing happened on LAN, we can say.
no. he was a good soldier. He followed strats. He understood strats. He would help implement and make them and provide input and give good feedback. But he also, and this is none of my doing, he just ended up being the clutch player. He ended up being the player that you wanted to have at the end of the after you plant the bomb, and in a 1-on-2 or a 1-on-3 or a 2-on-2, you wanted him to be one of those people, because he was the best at knowing when to peak and making moves and saving rounds for us. So pretty much an all-around great soldier. I wouldn't say he was a great entry fragger, but he was someone that you would just want to keep alive, and he could close out rounds for us.
Because he told me that later on, there was actually a period of time where he was going to join Team 3D potentially. He was being tried out to join them at one point in time, and he didn't get it. I think they chose CBZ or something else instead, or someone like that. And so if you look at his career, he didn't really play for that long. He had like the United 5 period, he had a little period in Tech, a little time back in United 5 again, and then he was basically just done for, so only a couple of years. And so was he kind of like a what-if player? Like if he'd have just played like everyone else for 3 or 4 years solid, what do you think he would have been?
I think, well, first of all, I love CBZ, but I think 3D made a mistake. I think Moses is at the time, he could have been one of the best players given the right opportunity. So pretty much his story all comes down to timing. He was too young to be a part of the real LAN team that I was wanting to create, where he was finishing up high school, and then afterwards, and he was in his little love phase. Then he went on to college, and he started getting into the doing all the freshman stuff and learning about, girls and alcohol and skipping class and all that stuff, having fun in Chicago. So he had a lot of distractions at the point when he probably could have just reached the highest levels of Counter-Strike.
Okay, so one of the periods when the team started to transition towards what would eventually become the LAN team you're talking about, the one we were all local to Chicago, was when, mouz was gone, fRoD was gone because he knew this was coming, he knew the move was coming, and you brought in DeBears and Tool. And now Tool's not someone people are going to remember, but obviously DeBears is, he actually still does some casting nowadays for EPL, and you went to this LAN called EverLAN. And this is a LAN, where DeBears to this day is like mad tilted off the face of the earth if you ever bring this LAN up, because he remembers this was the LAN where you played against NOA and you had like a super close game and there was some sort of a flash bug or nuke, and didn't this just like rob you of the chance to go to the final? Because as I remember, I think he tells it like, because NOA obviously had like, they had like huge names, Element, Jaguar. The implication was they kind of used like star power to influence the refs or something. Do you have anything to tell me about this story?
So, two things. One, there was a skipped United 5 lineup. Before that one, it was when we kind of merged with TSG. So it
was afterwards, mate. That was after.
Yeah. No. It was a.
Let me hit. Okay.
Yeah, the Tool DeBears one was kind of on its way out, but this one, the second one was CBZ and Hare and Trip and Dominator and DeBears all living together in a 2-bedroom apartment in Chicago.
Okay. That was the one after, mate. That was the winter part. I'm on about the one before, the one in the summer where you went to EverLAN. Don't worry, we'll get to that. I know the order of these things. You've got the order mixed up there.
Oh shit. Okay, then I'm gonna just go with you. But
it's okay,
the one so DeBears has always, there's something actually called the DeBears curse.
Absolutely.
Where he plays in these events, and there's no fix. There was no like, what do you guys call it nowadays? Match bot or something?
E-bot, yeah. You can't, like, essentially if someone crashes, you can't restore the round like you could in the old days.
So every LAN match that we had versus these great teams, something would happen. It would crash, and it would be to our detriment multiple times. And then I guess one of them is the story that you're telling right now, and exactly played out exactly how you said. The stars from NOA and the manager at the time went up, shared their case with the brain dead referees who controlled the server, and ultimately got things overturned to work out in their favor. And then me being this over positive, maybe over cocky leader of the team, instead of fighting it, I'm like, don't worry guys, we fucking got this. They know that they're cheating. We're going to beat them anyways. And I always took that attitude, and I shouldn't have. That's terrible, because one round and economy does make a difference, as everyone knows. But at the time, my head got in the way probably of some victories, because that same scenario happened multiple times. But no, definitely at that event, NOA got the better of us with the DeBears curse.
Okay. So it was actually, the lineup you're talking about is the one that comes afterwards. This is the one I want to talk about now, which was where, as you say, basically you took half of U5 and you merged it with half of TSG. And at the time, TSG had actually, risen up to be one of the better teams. They'd been at ESWC. They had some good players there. And so you took in the players you're talking about. You took in Sunman, you had CBZ, you had DeBears, and then it was you and who was the fifth person?
Let's see.
The fifth of me. I can look it up, actually. Let me have a look.
Dominator,
that's right, yes. Obviously one of the best players on TSG. So you made this team where the actual idea was, and this had never been done in North American Counter-Strike before, you were the first team to have a team house. And you all moved to somewhere in Chicago, right?
Yes, but you can't say team house. It was like a team 2-bedroom apartment with like just shy of bunk beds, you know.
Okay. This already sounds like a bad idea as you're describing it now. Like put 5 guys in a house like this, and I would already guess, you know, just from having watched reality TV shows, probably going to be some problems. It's probably going to be some good times, but some problems, right?
You know what? I think there were real no problems with the team. We were great and we had fun, and you know, Charlie's dad even lived in Chicago and gave us jobs. So we were making money during the day, and our schedule was really flexible, and we were just playing and fragging and having a good time. The problem came when people started getting girlfriends and adding girlfriends to our 2-bedroom apartment. Then we started having some issues.
So in this scenario here, I mean, we've mentioned De Beers was one of the players on the team. It was actually already famous at this point in time, the De Beers curse, and essentially it went like this. If it was an online match, De Beers used to be one of the best players in North America. You know, there's a reason he was on Team 3D, and he'd been on Tech and a bunch of teams that were all good teams, you know. And yet, for some reason, at these offline events, famously the CPLs, obviously, it just always went wrong for him, you know. Either he had a bad match or you had these famous things here. And so in this team, actually, he had what to me is, I always think of it as the most famous De Beers curse moment, because I saw it with my own eyes, and I still, like, I don't believe in ghosts, mate. I don't believe in, like, fate or anything like that. But I saw this match you played against a team called the Titans, and they were from Denmark, and they were the ESWC champions. So they were a very good team. And funnily enough, I think this game was also on Mill, right? And you were playing against them, and the game was close. You know, maybe it was like, I don't know, 10-10 or something. It was a close game, right? And it's not that De Beers' PC crashed, okay? Because if your PC crashes, you get a blue screen of death. We all know that. We've all seen it before. His PC just turned off. He was playing in a round, in like a 1v1 or 2v2 or something, and I think he was even trying to defuse maybe, and his PC just turned off. Like, this is getting to a level where when you see that happen, you're just like, what can you really do about that, right? Do you remember this?
Yeah, I do. But it happened so many times. It's like it became natural. It became like, all right, guys, we got to get off to a really good start, because when it gets close, something bad's going to happen. Like that's kind of the mentality that we had to have going into these things, because it wasn't a fluke at any point. And we couldn't kick him. It's not his fault, but that fucking curse. It happened to us versus 4 Kings as well. A similar CPL on Kabul.
What was he actually like as a player, though?
He was great for the team. He was great for positive attitude. His ability to play online and LAN, I feel like was equal. He was a great LAN player. He had a great attitude. He brought happiness and laughter into the server when maybe I was ultra serious. So I felt like he was an essential piece of the puzzle. And I don't know. I guess in the apartment, it was like taking care of a child. It brought us all together. It's like we had a child, and we were caring for him. Just kidding, Eric. If you ever watch this. But no. All around great guy, and great teammate.
So, okay, in this team, how did this team compare to the classic U5 in terms of, like, you know, how strict were you with tactics? How good were people at following them? Like for example, if you're talking about a player like De Beers, he always seemed like, if you ever know him as a person, like, I've always thought a lot of people in America exaggerate if they, like, everyone claims, oh, I've got ADHD, you know, if they're gamers, just because they have short attention spans and they get bored. But if anyone actually has it, he must have it, because he's someone where I know he is a guy where if you talk to him, he's going a million miles a second, he's switching out. So how do you use a player like that? What was this team like in that sense? It must have been a different setup from the classic Q5, right?
It was, but I think at the time the skill level of these guys was pretty. Maybe a little bit better.
Yep.
When you bring in Sunman and Dominator, and you know, the skill level is definitely a little bit higher. So you could start to get away from the concrete setness of the strategies. Although they were great too, they kind of bought into that style. And it's funny because it seems like Counter-Strike is a living like game. It evolves. Like people in it evolves, tactics evolve, and there are points when a strict strategic game worked great, and then there are times I feel like where a very loose style is better. So I think that it started getting away from us. The effectiveness of the real strategic, strict play style um, when we were playing against very loose teams. So I don't know. It was I don't think we had as much success with this team as we could have for multiple reasons. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know why. Fucking girlfriends is why. That's exactly why.
When you look back on this era, what like was the plan to have everyone local? Like, did it work out in the way you expected? Like, if you could do it all over again, would you just stick with the classic NA team where where you're all from your different cities and you just meet up for the event? What did you think of it? Obviously, like the experience might be fun, but was the actual formula solid?
So, if I were to do it all over, I would have stuck with the initial 5 and kept my brother in the lineup and kept fRoD and Slick in the lineup. I think that in Trip, we had a great thing going, and we should have just kept working that out. I think our dream of becoming local was just ahead of its time, and without the resources, without the money, and without all these things backing you, you have to start adding in all these external stresses about paying rent, about making money, having a car. At that time, sharing a room with a teammate, sharing one bathroom with 5 teammates. Like, you start adding in all these external stresses when you don't have the financial backing that teams have nowadays, that really just sets you up for failure. So I think if I were to go back in time, definitely stick with the same team and just work as we were doing with success. However, it's obvious that nowadays this formula of having teams together living in a house is the correct formula for what I believe success.
So one of the things that's interesting is, like, when you were in U5 and you had fRoD, like you said, you used him in a very set way, and it was kind of like part of the tactics. He was like an extension of what you want to do in the server. Well, the year after the team we're talking about now, in 2005, is when he basically became like pretty much the best player in the world, and that complexity team was kind of like, it was the fRoD show, I mean, you had Trip still there, and they kind of were built around fRoD. Was it kind of wild to see him go on and become some superstar player who was even beating the Europeans, winning big tournaments?
No, that was great for me to see that, and I played one tournament after United 5 kind of disbanded with Mouse Sports over in Asia, but so I didn't really follow much of the scene. But every time I logged on just to see what was going on and saw that Complexity was doing great, I was super happy for Trip and fRoD. I had so much respect for those guys and wish nothing but the best for them. So I don't know. I knew that they were great, and I think Trip took over the leadership role and maybe shared that with Warden a little bit too at some points. But I knew that they had their heads on right, and they were a great North American team to root for. So they could have beat anyone.
So
fRoD was definitely the best. Watching some of his highlights, he was, I think, one of the best 1.6 players of all time.
Sure. So actually, interestingly, like I said, the other person from your U5 team that was in that Complexity team, which was one of the best teams, in NA history, was Trip, and he actually became the in-game leader. And he actually did a Reddit AMA recently where people can ask him questions, and the answers. And someone asked him about Hare, and he basically said, like that. He really took a lot of like the set strats from you and doing dry runs to perfect them and stuff. Like, was he someone you can see as like a successor in that regard?
Oh yeah, he's great. He was one of the best, soldiers you could ask for as a commander, I guess is how I'd say. He was a great participant, followed everything, and intelligent guy, and a great person. So he took what he what learned and what we did right, and made it his own with complexity. So. Uh, Super proud and happy that he had the success that he did.
So you referenced it already, but after United 5, there was one big kind of last tournament for Hare to play in, which was a very weird circumstance, because what happened was this tournament circuit began called World Esports Games, WEG, and what they did was, it was a guy who actually is still around the CS scene now, Kan Yang, and he used to organized the tournament. It would be in South Korea, which at the time was very, very exotic, I mean, because we were from Counter-Strike, not StarCraft, not a lot of us knew about Korea or the Asian countries in general. So he would have this tournament there, and the whole point was it was televised. So teams would fly over, and it wasn't like, going to a CPL for 3 days. You would be there for a month. And in this month, you would live in sort of a little chalet. You'd be with the team you were with. You'd practice, and you wouldn't eat. Again, at CPLs, you play 4 or 5 games a day. You would play one match here. You'd go to the studio, you play your match, then you go home, you prepare for the next one. So it was a very alien environment. And not only that, but you weren't with an NA team. You actually went to stand in because Mouse Sports, the German Mouse Sports, one of their players couldn't make it. It was actually Gore, the guy from Austria, who was a very good player. And so instead, they were looking for people. I mean, obviously, they need someone last minute who doesn't have school, who can fly out. And so they pick you, you fly out. Now, this experience must have been wild.
Oh, it's great. It was amazing. Just to be offered the spot was amazing. But loved it, and it's something I can put on my resume. And actually, to this day, I put this on my actual real life professional resume.
Okay, what do you put?
I say professional gamer, traveled with Mouse Sports to Korea for spot to compete in the World Esports Games. It's It's a bullet point down at the last section of my resume on personal fun facts or some, conversation starters.
Just to catch their eye.
Yeah, and people go through this. Actually, I have a great resume for healthcare. They go through this whole resume, and then all they want to talk about is the bottom when it says professional gamer. So I give credit to that line, and I guess my experience with Mouse that allowed me to put that there. I think it probably got me a couple of jobs along the way.
Okay, but a really weird aspect of this is, again, here, this team was German. They were speaking in German, they were from Germany, not all of them had super good English. And I remember there was some sort of system, right? Didn't they give you, flashcards for the names of the spots or something? How was that? Did you pick up any of it pretty well?
So I had to learn German words for window and vent and outside, and I had to learn how to count to 5. 1, 2, 3, da da da.
Okay.
So I had to do that, and they put me in a role where I could, in a way, ignore what they were doing, and they could work in pairs of 2s or 3s to accomplish their goal, and then kind of just has me as an accessory piece to the puzzle. But I'd still have to be able to communicate, and it was super difficult because this was not they did not make it easy on me. It was all yelling in German, but we were there for a month, so I did absorb a little bit of it, and I was able to communicate with them by the end of it. So we ended up playing pretty good and doing good in the tournament.
Okay, so then why did Hare decide to step back? Why did you just become CEO of U5 and just start doing the business side? And you still had CS teams, but it was other players. Why not stay as the in-game leader? Why not stay playing Counter-Strike? What made you pull back?
So I pulled back after that event all the way. I gave up United 5. It was just given over to a West Coast guy named Killabees who wanted to manage. I was completely done with gaming.
Okay.
And that was because I was at a point, I think I was 20 or 21. I was at a point where I need to start making money and having a solid income, and either decide whether to go back to school or get a job or work. But I just felt like I was at a turning point in my life where if you're not able to be number one in Counter-Strike at that time, on the number one or number two team consistently, there's not much in the future for you. So I was starting to look at my future and thought that it was just, it was my time. I just had one last hurrah in Korea. I got to start doing the responsible thing. And I was never Actually, I take that back. I was anticipating esports getting this big. We saw it this big over in Korea. We knew it was going to be this big in America at some point, but I just couldn't wait around for that to happen. So it was time for me to put my big boy pants on and start doing the adult thing.
Sure. So when you're in this period where it's over, you're like retired, etc., were there ever any times you thought about doing a comeback? Did you ever come close to doing it?
So there was a time in the second season of I think it's CGS. Is that the
for Source?
Source, yeah.
Yeah.
So the season one went, and I saw that teams were having these pretty decent, I guess, for the time salaries.
Sure, yeah.
And I was like, hey, maybe I should try. So I actually hooked back up with De Beers and then a couple of guys on a team called Eminence, and we tried to go to the Season 2 Combine, which at the time was a tryout. So I came back for probably a 6-month period, a little bit late to be considered a good player for Season 2. But I did come back and I enjoyed it and had another great couple road trips and LAN tournaments and time with the Bears. So that was fun. But, as it goes now, is married with a beautiful wife, kid, house, and I'm working my dream job now. So as much as seeing Counter-Strike bloom as it is, and as much as it pulls at my heartstrings and makes me want to come back in some capacity, it's just too much of a risk with all that I have going right now.
So one of the things I like about talking to people when they've their career in esports is over is they can be a lot more honest. They don't have to hold something back in case that rival hears them, or in case they want to go and join a team one day, or they don't have to keep any of the bullshit up, basically. So a question I have for you is, was there ever in any of these United 5 type teams, was there ever a big roster move that you almost made, or someone good that you were trying to get in who you almost got in the team that could have maybe changed the course of history in some way?
I think the roster change that we made, excluding fRoD and Moses and Slick, I think changed history for the worst. I think that definitely that should have been something that we stuck it out. As far as what we did, I would say no. I felt like we obtained the best players along the way that we could have, and performed as good as we could have, and we definitely prepared as good as we could have. We didn't always perform that way, but I don't have any regrets as far as that goes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right,
Fucking if you're a pro player right now and you want to know what ruins teams is girlfriends, and I'm just gonna tell you that completely honest. That's girlfriends in the LAN house is a no-go. You got to wait until you're done with your gaming years, and then you can settle on one girl in particular and fall in love. But if you fall in love while you're on a pro team, your pro team is dead.
Okay. Right, I've got some simple questions, but you can take them wherever you want. Okay, so during your time as a pro, who was the best player you played on a team with?
Um, Moses or Trip, definitely. fRoD ended up being the best player in the world, but when he was on our team, he wasn't the best. So I'm gonna say that, you know, Trip or Moses carried us to our highest points. So I'll go with them.
Okay. Who was the best player you played against?
Best player we played against. I remember one event we played United 5 versus I forget what team, but we played against DSN on train,
Okay.
and he single-handedly just freaking absolutely destroyed us, ran around doing whatever he wanted. So I felt after that event that he was the best player in the world. I don't know what he's doing now. Is he still playing, or is he coaching a Chinese team or
Yeah,
something?
there was some story where he just came back recently to coach some Chinese team, and he was actually, he played many years in 1.6 after that and was in some very legendary teams, So it's interesting you picked him out. That was before actually he became, a superstar type.
Yeah, I never felt like I was single-handedly just beat up that bad as I was in that one game.
Okay.
So
Who was the best in-game leader you played against? Who's the guy who impressed you with the strats or how they approached it?
mm, let's see. Shit, I don't know. And I don't even know. I know I watched every single demo on halflifetv.org or whatever got frag demo sites.
Yeah.
And I can't even recall who I would stay up late studying. So that one I got to defer. It sure as fuck wasn't Moto.
Okay, I think we've established that. Okay, well, maybe you can agree or disagree with this comment then. So Moses told me that both of you were huge fanboys of Veslin's Team 9.
Oh, there we go.
Because he said that you used to because obviously they were very favorite. Okay, so Heaton and Protty's SK, they were more like the loose style, just use the stars to beat you. But the Team 9 team was more like the strategy team, where you can tell they've got the playbook and.
There we go. That rings a bell. So that's who we watched, and I got to give it to him.
Okay. What about in the game? Who do you think was the smartest player you played against?
Who do I think the smartest player? I always felt playing against Sunman was. I thought he was a really good player. I would compare him a lot to when I'm watching Snacks nowadays. I compare Sunman to him, and we ended up playing on the same team, and I don't know if I'd give him that credit. But when I played against him, I thought he was one of the best, one of the smartest players.
Okay, I can see that because the thing about Snacks and Sunman actually is they're both uncannily good if they're in a clutch situation. They kind of somehow they just know where the opponent is and they make the move that gets them in the 1v3 so they get into a 1v2.
Yeah, and if you're an opposing player and you hit tab and you see that he's the last fucking guy alive, you know that this isn't over yet.
Yeah.
You may have 3 guys left, but this isn't over yet. So, yeah. I'd go with him.
So, okay, since we started the interview, joking about the fact that you are now just Moses' brother, that is your legacy for the people who haven't watched this interview, don't know the old school Hare. What do you think of the fact that Moses himself, was gone for a long time in Counter-Strike? He wasn't there in the latter days, and even in CSGO, he did a brief comeback as a player, but, there wasn't actually in NA at the time the infrastructure, unless you were in the top 2 teams, basically, to go to any big tournaments, Mm-hmm. What do you think about the fact that now he's kind of he's established himself as an analyst, and he's doing commentary, and he's at all the big events now? What do you think of that? I
think it's amazing. I think he's earned it. He has stuck out the drought. And I think that all the, I think all the success and the glory that comes to any of the old timers like yourself, like Moses, like the Room on Fire guys, Torble, I think any success that comes to you guys for sticking it out through the drought and bringing it to what it is right now, I think you guys have earned it. And Jason has earned it. For a lot of time where he's just doing it for fun and doing it for the love of the game, and wasn't making money and didn't have these great jobs and wasn't on TV. So I think that all you guys have earned this. Anything that you have coming to you, and I think it's about to be big. I think it's gonna get even bigger. So props.
So since he's someone where it's very rare that we have access to anything from his past or his family or anything, do you have like a funny anecdote about him or anything to do with gaming with him that you could tell us? Something that'll like, it's acceptable to say on camera, but it might embarrass him a little bit, so it'll be fun in that way. Do you have anything you can give me about Moses?
I don't think I'm gonna give you, of all people, ammunition to use against my brother. You guys have to have enough ammunition traveling together and being with him. So I'm going to defer that one.
Fair enough. So if people didn't see you play as a player, what would you describe? What was Hare the player like? What was Hare the leader and Hare the player like? What was your style? How did you see yourself? How did you use yourself within your own system?
I feel like I was the guy that sacrificed myself. I could do an entry role, but I was mostly the guy that would take the hits, take the punishment to get my people in the right spots so that they could win the rounds. I think that if you found me in a clutch situation as my teammate, you were kind of fucking gritting your teeth and a little bit nervous of how this was about to turn out. But every once in a while I would surprise them and make some magic happen. But yeah, it just I think my performance outside of the matches was my biggest legacy as far as leading a team goes.
Okay. At the end of the interview, do you have someone you want to give a shout out to or thank or say hello to if they watch the interview?
I would say just obviously a shout out to my brother and congrats on all your success. And I love seeing you guys. I want to give a shout out to VP. I know that they won't watch this interview at all, but I would like to say that it is so cool seeing those guys kill it at this point. Just I think they're the best team on the world. I would like to say that I'm disappointed in Team Liquid. I really liked you guys at one point, but now you're not very fun to watch, and I have replaced you in my heart with Optic Gaming is actually fun to watch. They're an exciting team, so I know they won't watch this either, but I think that they could be something. Obviously, we have the Cloud9 to root for in North America, sure. but Optic is really fun at this point to watch. So I hope to keep rooting for you guys.